Ayin Beis, volume 1, up to chapter 138, in discourse 35. And the ongoing explanation of the yichud, the unification that the Ovis, the patriarchs of Rabbi Yaakov achieved, which is, as he explained, Kel Shaddai, to fill up the divine awareness within the structure of existence to the maximum, which has been calling the yichud, in the words of the Pardes, that there's two yichudim, the yichud of that keeps the world in its perfect state, so to speak, its maintenance, and then there's the chidush, which will be Matan Torah, which we haven't yet discussed. So explain the difference between the yichud of Yisrael Saba and Tfuna, and there's a yichud of the Abba Ve'ima Ilayin, which this really means two levels of unification, both on the intellectual level, that is beyond the emotions per se, but one that is closer to the midas, to the emotions, which means closer to an inclination of some structure leading toward chesed or gvura. That is Yisrael Sab and Tfuna. Yisrael Sab is essentially the midas within Chochma, within wisdom, and Tfuna is the midas within Binah, or more specifically in the Nehi of Chochma, the Nehi of Binah, or of Abba and Ima. As we said, Nehi is how one applies himself to teaching it, that it should fit and be tailored to the recipient. So in the last chapter, in 137, he went on and said that these two are primarily, one is primarily driven by Binah. Yisrael Sab and Tfuna, though it's Chochma and Binah, but it's primarily Binah, so it's really the Hey, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Hey. And the higher Yichud, which is of Abba Ve'ima Ilan, which is really Atzmus HaMeichel, we call core intelligence, that's beyond any form of inclination, the raw cognitive power, that is the Yud. So that's primarily true Chochma. Chochma in its purest form. Now, the difference between one is Atzilus Shabbat Silus and one is Bria Shabbat Silus. So to explain that, he explained the difference in Atzila and Silus and Bria and Biyah. The key difference is Muhus. The Atzilus experience the Muhus, the core essence of the energy, and in Bria Biyah it's only the Mitzias. Mitzias means you know of it, but you don't know what it is. Of course, there's a level that's even lower than that. You don't even know of it. So, explaining that, he broke it down into several parts. That first of all, that even though the kav, only a reflection of it enters in Atzilus, but that which enters, Atzilus appreciates to the fullest. That's the muhus of the heart, as he calls it. The muhus, not the mitzias. Then he continues and says that in truth there's also an etzem of the kav, not just the ara, atzmus of the kav, as he put it. That atzmus of the kav resides in the atzmus of chochma. And he explains this, that the kav has actually two components. There's the chitzenius of it and the primis. The example being used when the teacher teaches L'elam Yilmud Adam Talmidei B'derech Tzara, in a summary. A summary is not a short version, a short piece rather. It's not a short section. It's a summary of the entire thing. Within it resides the whole idea, except it's very brief. And by Bayim Shana, when it comes 40 years, he'll appreciate it. So it's all in there. So in the Kav, therefore, carries in it the whole story of the Eir Ein Sof that's even higher than what is being revealed. Just like the teacher, there's much more in the information than what is being revealed to the student at the moment. He compared it to the Rishima. So just like the Nikud of the Rishima, it carries in the Etzem, the impression of the letters, the same thing as the Kav also has an element of that. And this is what he called Torah's Mashla HaKadmaini, because a mashal is not a concealer completely. A mashal is manifest idea in a lower level, not like a tzimtzum. The tzimtzum b'derech silik is complete concealment. A mashal is like the parsa, like a veil, and the idea is transmitted through it. And so we say Torah is mashal kadmoni, a mashal for kadmoni shalel, meaning an example. So the Torah which comes from wisdom, means that Chochma of the Torah has access all the way to the core. It's an example for the source. It's not just a cutoff, a silence. It is an example. So he says that means that the Chochma of Atzilus, the etzem of the Chochma of Atzilus, really contains in it the Chochma at the 10 hidden spheres. And actually, he says, and this is especially understood according to the opinion that the energy also has spheres, because then you could say that the the root of Chochma of Atzilus, the core of the etzem of Chochma Atzilus, is rooted in Chochma of the 10 hidden spheres, and the Chochma of the 10 hidden spheres carries in it the Atzmus Ein Sof that's higher than the 10 hidden spheres. That's what he said here. Which means you could also understand it according to the other shita, but it's not as eloquent, so to speak. Because according to the other shita, that the air doesn't have, like he says, according to the other shita, that the sheresh hakav there's only bligvul. So then there's a certain jump from the bligvul to the gvul. So how could you really say Torah is a mashal kadmeni for that? There's a jump, but here because it is rooted in the 10 hidden spheres, the air too. So you have this ability to flow through this. And he explained it with the example Baruch. So the Beis of Baruch is true. It's very distant from the word Baruch, but it's still the same Beis. So there's a miyut, there's a diminishment, but it's not a siluk. You can't say the Beis of Baruch, you could say it's diminished. You don't have the Reish Vav Chav, so you don't have the whole word, but you can't call it a siluk. Call it a miyut. Like he says in the Kitzur. That in this case, it's only the miyut of the... What do you say here? Like miyut. The Chochma Gui rak miyut. So yes, it's true. Chochma Atzilus is not Chochma of the 10 hidden spheres, but there's still a common denominator. They're both Chochma. They both have some type of element of Chochma within them, like the Beis and the Beis alone and the Beis of Baruch. Good. This is all the etzem of Chochma. This is called Abba v'Im Eilan. But Binah, which is where you saw Saba v'Tvuna, the Hey, there already you're dealing with comprehension. Once you're dealing with comprehension, there you only have a reflection. B'zichuk makam, like the Eitz Chaim says, we only have the revelation. Ein Sof comes from a distance, and that's why the primary shtalshlus is from Binah, and that's why Binah is called Machaya Chaim, Elikim Chaim. Because it's the source of life is a reflection already of the actual source. It's not the core source. Okay. So now we have that there's two levels in Moichin itself. Yisrael Sabbatun is also Moichin. It's not Moichin in Midas. But it's the Moichin that's already is a relationship with beginning to have Midas within them. The inclinations, as we spoke. And from that will actually become, like he said, that's the Makir from Moichin of Zah, the Midas, the Moichin, the intelligence in the Midas, is rooted in the Midas within the intelligence. But by contrast, Abba v'Imilon shenhei neis yud hainu b'chinas primis bina shu b'chinas asagasam hos kome primis chachma v'u b'chinas yichud primi davosh amer b'zeh atzmos ein sof baruch hu. So higher Abba v'Ima, which is intelligence itself removed from any inclinations, is the higher level, and that's the higher yichud that we've been talking about. Okay. Now we move on to Kuf Lamed Ches, 138.
That's the creative yichud, not the maintenance.
Right. Even the word maintenance is a little off. It's not really maintenance. It's maintenance plus. It's basically the maximum of air that you could have in existence. In the beginning you call it maintenance, but then he says like l'tzor chet etzadas. So it's essentially the best. It's not the minimum maintenance. It's the maximum.
But yichud Allah creates a new energy.
Well, we didn't even get there yet. Yeah. Yichud the higher yichud, the yichud pnimi of Abba v'Ima. So what we sum up here is that there's really 4 levels of Moichin, and you could say Midas and Moichin. You have Yaakov, is the lower, below the chest, which is the level of primarily Midas, emotions, Like you said, but has some time, like the psak din. So your bottom line is the application or the emotions. That you love God, it's connected to your life, it's connected to you. Within that, there's a little meich. Then comes the higher part of Zah, Yisrael Zuta, or Nar Yisrael. Here, you're not focusing on the application, you're focusing on the godless, the mature mind, but it's still about maturing the midas. It's not still in the domain of midas. Except now you're not just dealing with the midas as it is, the pure application. It's midas that are developing to something more sublime. Then you move over to the domain of meichin, and there too we have two levels: Yisrael Saba and Tfuna. That is Abba v'Ima, or the midas of Abba v'Ima. So that's how now you're in the world of the cognitive, of intelligence, of intellect. But how intellect is leads to an application, not core intellect. And then you have this Yuchid Abba v'Ima Eloin, that's core intellect, that's beyond any midah. Not just midah, no excitement, like you said, but no midah, not even an inclination. You're in the essence of the idea of a concept, and can go any direction possible. Now, obviously, each one forms the next, so there's a place where they all meet, where each one meets the next level. But essentially, it's four levels. Now, in order to understand how, in Hasagim, in comprehension, you can have a state of muhus. Seemingly, muhus is something that you touch, you experience. Here we're saying this hasagas hamuhus. Hasagas hamuhus is a comprehension of the core, as if you're, like I said, you have the actual thing itself.
So, like, how could you get the mahus? That's easy.
No. He said already, Hasagas hamuhus. Look at the beginning of the chapter. He says, before Gan Eden even.
If it's only audit, isn't that the question? If it's only audit?
No, I'm telling you, the question is, he said that in Atzilus you have Hasagas hamuhus. Same thing in Gan Eden, Hasagas hamuhus. We're talking here Abba v'Imi line. We're not talking the lower level. Binah, yes, Binah does not have it. Binah is not Hasagas hamuhus.
He's talking about this line,
yeah, the whole thing, the whole Abba v'Imi line. Look at the last two lines of the chapter. Let's continue from the last two lines. Mashenka, what does he say? Abba v'Imi line, Shein Yisur, Ham Primus Abina, read. Shubechinas Hasagas hamuhus. We're not talking about the outer bina. We're not talking about the hay. We're talking the yud. So he's asking to understand, what does this mean? How in Hasog is the state of muhus? He's going to explain it. Even though that today we can't really understand this in a complete fashion, complete understanding, how and what. Because all our comprehension today is only Metzias. So, but nevertheless, he's still nevertheless to understand at least a taste of it, an edge of it. So there should be some type of estimation, some type of hanocha, some type of some type of sense of it. It's very interesting. You don't really see this so often, this type of expression. So he's going to give an example to explain it. But let's go back to what he's going to say here. So he's saying now something very tremendous here. He's saying, how do we really have Hasagas hamuhus? Because, as I said, for example, when a person, let's say you have a child, and you have you give birth to a child. So anyone who's experienced it knows there's something that you can never explain. Just like there are many things in life, real experiences, unless you experience it, mamish, you can't explain it. Because the experience gives you a taste of it. Someone will tell a blind person what are colors. You can explain it from today till tomorrow. Muhusi will not get. Just to give an example. Someone, let's say you never went into water. Someone will say, what does it feel like going into water? So you can explain it feels wet, you feel submerged. But it's not muhus, it's mitzias. Muhus goes into the water and you experience it, that's it, mahu. So you could technically say that the whole idea of muhus is only experience. It's not hasaga. It's not comprehension. You don't comprehend the muhus of something. You comprehend the mitzias of something. Someone starts analyzing, explaining what it means to go into water. That's already hasaga, but that's not muhus. Muhus, all the explanation is not going to help if you don't go in. So it's not really a kasha, but it needs explanation. What means hasagas hamuhus? You can say hasagas hamitzias. You comprehend the existence of something, the mitzias, what's the word? The fact that it's there. So he says, so even though we can't fully understand this today, because we don't have hasaga gemura, eichama, what means hasagas hamuhus? Because all our comprehension today is in mitzias alone. We relate to mitzias things. So let's take an example. The table here, everybody can see. We can touch it. We can analyze it. It's more of a mohus thing. Someone say the table has atomic energy within it, and we have today understanding of atomic energy. Do you understand the mohus of an atom? The argument could be no, you don't. You know its properties. You can extrapolate that energy is something that's not tangible, but something as soon as it's not tangible, we are already not in the world of mitzias of the thing. So we are close to the mitzias of existence, not to the mahus of existence. Let's talk about a body and a soul. Even a spiritual person, the soul is, we relate to mitzias. We don't relate to mahus. We know it's there. We even know it's primary. We even know it's a powerful force. And we keep talking about refining our perspective to learn about things that are more sublime and more edel. But at the end of the day, what we relate to most are the tangible things in life. And muhus is something that, as he said, all our comprehension today is in mitzias of things. We know the existence of things. And then we analyze somewhat what makes them tick. So we really can't fully understand what really makes things tick as we relate to Gashmis. So like Levi Yitzchak Baditchever said to God, okay, a big kunz, you gave them Elam Haza to experience. And you write about Elam Haba in the books. Let them experience Elam Haba and write about Elam Haza in the books, and you'll see how they'll behave. So at the end of the day, no matter how spiritual we are, spirituality still remains something you have to work at. You have to remind yourself. It's not the tangible. It's not we don't relate to it to the muhus of it. So we relate more to the mitzias of things than to the muhus, basically to the externals, to the existence of something, which is why it's so easy for people not to value quality in this world. Because even though we all appreciate quality and we understand it's more important than quantity, but quantity, we live in a world where mitzias is what dominates our existence. Nevertheless, nevertheless, to understand somewhat, nefesh k'tzei literally means k'tzei is an edge, and nefesh k'tzei is a bit. Nefesh means nothing actually, but here we say nefesh k'tzei means almost an edge or something like that, a bit of an edge. So that we should have in it some hashara, some, I'm going to say imagination. Hashara means estimate actually. V'hanocha b'seichel. That the intelligence to understand it. Yuvan zal darach moshe will understand it with an example. Kamei ben kudus haskola. Di'im heyesu sichli b'bchinas seichel goli. The kudus haskola, meaning the point of an idea. Let's just say the idea is 2 + 2 = 4. Or an idea that every piece of matter has energy in it. This point, you just said one point without explanation. Someone says, I'm going to explain to you now an idea called how snow falls. So it's an idea. Snow is a certain crystallization of around a piece of dust, a certain temperature, and so on. Just giving an example. So, the Nekudas HaSkola, the point itself, we're talking about like the headline. Even though it's sichli, it's intelligence, and it's in a seichel gali, it's in a state of revealed seichel, because you're describing it. The The primiusa, its real nature and its primary personality is really only a hanocha sichlis. What does that mean? You don't have comprehension of it. It's like a sleiktzach. Hanocha sichlis means it's like an intellectual resonance that exists with it. Like we learned before, chapter 42. The Besechel Goli, that in revealed conscious and revealed intelligence, even though it's seichel, it's intelligent, it's not intuition, it's not faith, but the primary thing is hanocha. The leg in seichel was be'em leitzach azeh. The resonance, the conviction we used, hanocha, the conviction that this is the way it is. So if you look back in chapter 42, I remember we discussed it there in length. Let's go back there a moment. This is very important.
And also the premise that you're building your seichel goli from? Like
The same muscularism, no. That's not what he's saying. Muscularism is an axiom. Let's go back.
not muscularism, like if you have a certain premise that based on that you're working out.
No, the premise is a muscularism. What's a premise? An assumption. A premise is that you. No, he's not saying a premise. So how do you know the premise is right?
Right. That's exactly what my point.
That's not what he's saying. But he's not. No, it's a leitzach is the opposite. It's a resonance that you know for sure.
It's logical.
If you look in chapter 42, let's read it a moment.
What page is it on?
You can't find chapter numbers by number. You're lazy.
Very tight.
You want me to turn the pages for you?
Let's get. Okay, I got it.
Page 71. So let's just go back to what he was talking there about. He was talking there about he's speaking there that Chochma is fundamentally different than Binah. They're not just that Binah is just diminished Chochma, wisdom. Why? Because that Binah grasps only the mitzias of Elokus and Chochma is the Muhus. So it's mamish negate to what we're discussing here. He actually referred to it. He referred to it actually in the previous chapter. 1 second, did he?
Yeah.
It says for you.
Where do you see that?
It's like 10 lines up.
On the bottom of the page, yeah.
Oh, right. Because that's what he's elaborating now. So there he said, but how could you say Chochma is so different than Binah when Chochma is also Seichel? Look in chapter 41. Yediyah Sichlis.
Also 42, the first 2 lines.
That's what he's referring to now, but before he gets there. He says you can't say that's the diminishment of Chochma in order to reach into Binah. So he explained that Chochma is Ayin and Binah is Yesh. Because in the Nekudas HaSkola, what happens is in Chochma you have something that's beyond Seichel. A type of truth, a resonating truth enters into Chochma. And in chapter 42 he says, and here he goes into the detail. In other words, there are ideas that you can comprehend well, but you can't say it resonates with me. You know what the word resonate means, by the way? Resonate is a word, like when someone sings a song, it resonates in you because you already know the song, even if you don't know the song, but something touches you. You sense a truth to it. So you could have an idea, someone can give you a whole argument, and still doesn't ring true. Not because it rings false. It's a leitzach. It could be just blocked, or you didn't get it yet. Now, I'm not talking about now you think it's wrong. It just, you can't say, it just, I really get it.
So it's yeshman, but you couldn't call it in any sense Gilead Helam.
I don't know what you're talking about now. But then there's a point when that's what Chochma does. You'll have, for example, sometimes a person comes up with an idea, then you flesh it out in detail, in very big detail, Binah, and then you go back and someone's reading the plan and says something's missing here. So Chassidus brings an example that you can go b'derech haklosim. Sometimes a point, as it goes into Binah, you can wander off away completely from the original point. You can wander off. That's why you have to always keep Binah honest by connecting it to Chochma. Saying, what was my original idea? That's why whenever you have an idea, it's very important to write it down right away. Because once it's fleshed out, often you may go off, and Chochma has in it to say, let me go back. Is this still consistent with the original point that we had? And you say, now I got it. So there's an element where Hasaga can actually go away from that Hanocha, from that type of resonating truth. Chochma has resonance. What Chochma doesn't have is necessary explanation. Remember we said before, Shasik Rav. That came from Chochma. He knew it's correct. That he didn't have the right words. So sometimes you say, I know this is right, I can't explain it yet, but I know it's right. Now I'm not talking about an action, someone just is stubborn and says, he wants to stick to his guns. We're talking about a person who knows you can trust his intelligence and his instinct is that way. So he says, where does Chochma have that? Chochma has it because it has in it an Ayin of Elokus. That's why intelligence has actually something that's beyond intelligence. It's not faith, but it's an emes. Because intelligence itself is not dafka, has to be truth. If you're a false person, you can come up with a whole theory that is completely based on falsities. It's also a logical theory. The element of resonance, emes, resonance, she says, so even though we're not talking about actually seeing it, like you actually would see it, there's an element of Chochma, like you see the experience, but there's a resonance that's more than just comprehension. So you really have like 3 levels here.
Because here he says also,
yeah. So basically there's three things. You could have Riyah. Riyah would be like Moshe Rabbeinu Zeh. He actually saw, his intelligence was just like he actually saw something with his own eyes. Then you could have the other extreme, you just understand it, the Metzias, and then you could have Muhus, which is a type of clarity and resonance that's not quite the level of Riyah Mamish, it's still in comprehension, but it's a resonance that says, I know this is right, and I know it well. So like the top of page Ayin Beis, look at Shabal Emek Primis Ayin v'nefle b'sichus shu ba'efen kach v'kach kshamer etzlo anukud sichus ba'inyan misyashves le'inyan v'tev es vet recht. So he's saying, so when you come to the comprehension, it could be concealed, but in it there's this type of resonance. We said then resonance, conviction. So it's seichel and a little beyond seichel at the same time. Yeah. Like he says later, what's the eitzah? How do you get to that place? He says, if you lose that element,
We'll bring it up here in our chapter also.
Yeah. If you lose that element, the key is to reconnect. That's why I wanted to go back, because he's connecting it directly.
This level is higher than the Hiyab Chochma.
I don't know. I don't want to jump guns. He's right now giving us a taste of what Hasagas HaMuhus is, even though today we don't really have a true Hasagas HaMuhus. But one step at a time. We're not to the conclusion. We're just beginning to understand Hasagas HaMuhus right now. Who says, by the way, Abba V'Am Laman has anything to do with Nehi? We're talking Nehi is in Shal Sab and Tfuna. We're talking now Abba V'Im Line. We're talking Hasagas HaMuhus.
This level of resonance of what he's discussing, is that higher than the Hiyab Chochma, or is it?
Where'd you get Nehi? Where's Nehi of Chochma here? I don't see the expression.
I'm seeing the same thing.
Where do you see Nehi of Chochma here?
Talk about it in the whole chapter.
That's Yisrael Sabbat Funa. We're talking now about Abba V'Ibn Line. We're talking on a different level.
Higher. So is that so we're higher than the Hiyab Chochma, right?
We're higher than Chochma Binah Bechlal. We're Chochma Binah Line. Atzmus HaChochma is what he's talking here. Read the last 2 lines in the last chapter.
There's no Nihi in that level?
I don't know. Maybe there is. Maybe there isn't. He's not there yet. Why are we jumping? Why? You're trying. He just said that you can't understand Hasagas HaMuhus. We're trying to understand Hasagas HaMuhus. Okay, so you guys are ahead of. I'm slower than you. Right now, I just heard that we barely can understand Hasagas HaMuhus, and it's giving us a taste. I'm very intrigued to know what that taste is. You already have that figured out. Good. I'm trying to understand how we understand Hasagas HaMuhus. That's what we're learning right now. And then we'll get to where we have to get. You already got it? You already understand Hasagas HaMuhus? Okay, I don't. He's just beginning to step and explain. I went back to chapter Mem Beis. He's not talking about Yisrael Saban Fun anymore. He's talking about Abba Ve'ime Eloyin. Right, that's what he's talking about. I don't know what you saw.
And that's the level of the Samsas. Is that Avoy Eloyin or is that Madrigas Al-Yonis?
I have no idea.
It says it here, I'm asking you.
I don't know. I'm reading here. I'm just referring to, because he referred to Perek Mem Beis. Not okay. So bottom line is, he's using Perek Mem Beis to explain that we can find some type of taste of what is Asagas HaMuhus. So in Perek Mem Beis, talk about Hanochas Sichlis. That's the long chapter about it there. He goes to brings there that so he says, what's the eighth that he comes and listen about Sichel Be'ezer come the Sach bin Kol Masher Shlasik bin you connect the bin the okay. So it would definitely be good to reread that chapter. But I read, I think, enough to be able to, let's take this into the next level here. Mm-hmm. Okay, she says like this. So we learned there that V'zeu hasiba. So we learned that what the leg and seichel was be'am leg tzachasazeh. So we have now something that is seichel, but there's an element in the seichel that is resonant and a conviction that's beyond just pure comprehension, like he explained in chapter 42. So that means Nekudas Haskalah. So I have to correct myself. It's not Nekudas Haskalah. It's not just the statement 2 + 2 is 4, or the snow is falling. It's a point. It's an idea that is resonant. Well, for us, 2 + 2 is 4 is resonant because we've been trained to know that, even though we don't know the proof for it and we don't know the understanding, but we just know that that's the way it is. But that's not a good example. I'm trying to think of a resonating truth. Okay, let's see if we'll come up with something. Anyway, V'zeu hasiba.
No, that's not a resonating truth.
Yeah, but
Most people.
The wind is lighter than water.
So I'm not sure of something from observation. I think resonating truth here is more of a conceptual resonating truth. There are things in observation. Obviously, we know, for example, that let's say, the ice is frozen water. But that's not. I don't think that's what he's using as an example. It's not through empirical means. He means, okay, it doesn't matter. Bottom line is, there's some type of resonating truth.
But enough a saga can you, even though you didn't experience the Chochma to begin with, you can get some sort of resonation. I think 2 and 4.
Well, who says if enough a saga you are reaching Chochma?
Yeah, so that's 2 and 4.
There's no such thing as a Binah without a Chochma.
All right, 2 and 2 is 4 for us. Yeah.
Okay, it could be. But 2 + 2 is 4 is just be accepted as a rule because it's, everybody accepts it.
So right.
It feels right, or you just heard it. You just know it as like, it's just like you know that the sun is going to rise tomorrow morning.
There's a spark to say that 2 + 2 is not 4.
In mathematics, you have to be able to prove that it's true. There are proofs for this type of statement, but it's not a good example because it's like there are things that we know are going to happen. We know that in 5 hours from now is going to be 5 hours from now. We know that the sun is going to set. That's not resonating truths. Those are just empirical realities that we just are aware of. Resonating truth is an idea that someone says. Let's say we're arguing about something, and different people have theories, and then someone says something and say that sounds right, and you can't really explain it yet, but it sounds right.
That's just right.
And I'm talking about intelligent people. I'm not talking about somebody just fluke. That's the example of a resonating truth.
See, the sun.
It's a resonating truth.
The sun doesn't go down. Doesn't resonate with me nearly as much as 2 + 2.
Okay, fine, but I'm just saying. To me, 2 + 2 and the sun going down is almost the same thing for me, because it's fine. That's not relevant to the point. If it resonates, fine. I'm looking for something. It's more of that type of resonating truth. So now he goes on. V'zeu hasiba mashanurein lepamim. And this is the reason why we see at times, be'eza hamtzoah sichli, any type of intelligent idea, intelligent conception. Hamtzoah. Svara, what's hamtzoah? Hamtzoah, how do you translate? Innovation. Any intelligent innovation, kasher miyageyes atzmei be'eza inyan, that when he struggles with something in any subject, she'ena muvalei, he does not understand, is not understood to him, and it falls into his mind, and his mind, it arises in his mind, that it's so and so, that at the moment when this innovation came to him, it resonated with him. Es wird ihm recht und es ist sehr gut. Und es ist ihm sehr gut. It's like resolves. Es wird ihm recht means he's come to some resolution. And es ist ihm sehr gut. And it's very peaceful, I guess the right word good here is. It's ihm sehr gut. It's very comforting. So you have, let's say you struggle with a problem, and you don't, what am I going to do? Back and forth, and then you suddenly come up with just a point. You don't yet, like he says, you don't yet fully understand it. But you're really struggling with it, and then suddenly, middle of the night, you suddenly, and you have a certain peace. You come to a certain resolution. I think I have the solution. You still have to work it out. But there's a moment of clarity, a moment of truth that you've arrived at. That's what he's describing it as. Okay, that I relate to for sure. That has happened many times. It's not even. You see, I see. Middle of the night, yes, middle of the night. I don't know yet. Mahus, he's giving us a taste. Did you read the words? Lahavan Efes say. He's giving us a taste of something that's more than Metzias and a taste of Mahus. He says we can't. Rabbi Rasha makes a very clear statement. He says like this. He says, "Agam she'ir shel lahavan zeis achshav." Today we cannot have asaga gemura eicha ma. What is Mahus? Because all our comprehension is all in Metzias. Nevertheless, we can have a taste. He's giving us an edge of a taste, and he's going to conclude. He's not there yet. Let's be patient. Let's read it line by line. If it's something that's not comprehensible, that the Rebbe Rashab says that he talks about himself as well. Hasagoseinu. He doesn't say hasagas your. That our comprehension today is not muhuz. So I would be very patient here and try to see what is he giving us to give us the taste of it. Yeah. So this is not necessarily. Okay, I'm realizing that this is not necessarily. That's maybe why he's not giving an example of 2 + 2 is 4 or something. This is not necessarily objective scientific truths or objective accepted truths. It's almost subjective ones. It's talking about sensing the correctness in a particular situation, knowing what's right. Knowing what's the right approach to something, and you don't yet have real explanation, but you sense, you have a resonating conviction that this is the solution. And then it needs to be developed. That's what it sounds like he's saying here.
We meaning that him included?
That's what it says here. Kol hasagosenu. That's the word he uses.
He's a generation.
You could say what you want. I'm telling you what he writes.
You said that all these levels, he experienced these levels, and he went up all the way up. I mean, unless Mahus means Atmos, according to the way we talked the other day, that he experienced these levels as he crept all the way to the top. So, but basically, even Mashiach will accomplish something for the Rabbeim. It's not just for us. They'll also reach a level, because compared to what they could reach, it's
mitzvah. Experienced it, but he wasn't a saga. Wasn't a saga.
No, asaga too. He says, "Kol asaga seinu achshav."
No, but I'm saying he said he experienced it at all the levels. Maybe he experienced it, but there wasn't a level of asaga.
Maybe. Listen. Since we didn't experience it, we're just talking Metzias altogether here. So he says, and this is the reason. What's the reason? So the reason is because the main thing is the Hanoch. He's explaining why at times we see that even something that you don't understand, that's the key. It's a very big question here. You don't understand it, and yet when you struggle, something comes into your mind that gives you a certain sense of its truth. It says Eina Muvenle. It says clearly, Inyan she'eina Muvenle. Es wird beim Recht und es ist sehr gut. And afterwards, when he begins to immerse himself and engross himself in this comprehension, how, uma, what is it?
Second line, yeah.
What? Yeah. He discovers and realizes he doesn't understand it yet. It's still not right. Something's still not right. But in truth, he sensed already something that did legzich. Something that did nichale, that did, what did I say before? That did resonate with him. And we're not talking, by the way, this is a good parenthesis that we can refer to many times. That is hallucinating. No, but shamuta b'dimyein is hallucinating is for most people too far. But muta b'dimyein is someone who's making a mistake in his imagination. He's delusional. That's the word. That's good. Next time someone says something, we're not talking about someone who's making an error, a delusional error. That's good. So no, it's nichale, because if it's muta b'dimyene, the whole thing. He's saying that when you think about it, you really don't understand it, and yet something did resonate. So how can there be resonance in the thing you didn't understand? So he qualifies as the parentheses that we're not talking about someone who thinks it's resonating. Talking about he actually did resonate. That's an important point.
The last 3 lines were mamish almost word for word from the Alakar.
You're shocked?
No.
Okay, it's the same Rebbe. You know. I have an example for this. Mashiach. Mashiach is an example. When you, or God even for that matter. No one has Yediyas HaMahus in God. We don't have Asagas HaMahus in God. But you put everything aside, you definitely sense, most people sense, maybe everybody does, that there's something greater than what we see here. You don't need to take anything to come to that realization. That there's more to reality. Now this is a good example. You start thinking about it. Okay, what is that more? You don't have much to say. I mean, unless you learned. I'm talking like on a basic level. So you realize you don't really understand it, but that resonating fact that there's something more resonates regardless. It's a hanocha. Like he says, it's leitzach. Mashiach. And again, I'm not talking about someone who's jaded or muta b'dimyene. The idea that the world will come to a harmony, a world of peace, a world of is something that leitzach. You know, obviously you can challenge and say and be cynical. I'm not saying that you can't make an argument, but there is a resonating element to it. Just like there's a resonating element to a person who feels that even though there's illness, we know we can conquer the illness. How do you know for sure? Because there's something about human resilience, there's something about human power that you feel and you sense a resonating. I'm not talking about faith now. I'm not talking about Amunah Mashiach. The faith that God said Mashiach is going to come. I'm talking about the idea that a world will be in a better place in the future than it is today. As I said, God. I mean, I'm just giving examples because I think these are good examples that fit here. They're resonating, yet you can't call them that you understand it or you can really explain it. You could you can make a case, but there's something that sounds right, that feels right about it. That's what he's saying here. So even though Ein Amuvanle doesn't understand it, and when he concentrates on it, he can't really. He finds that he can't explain it. Nevertheless, in truth, the thing resonated with him.
It's a question.
No, it's not a question. It's a statement. Okay. Well, no, yeah, you could say it's a question, but no. He said, "V'zeu hasiba," because there's a hanacha sichlis. That's the siba that you can find a person who may not yet understand something, and still have a resonance.
So he has a resonance, then he lost it.
He didn't lose it. No, he doesn't lose the resonance. No.
So it's like a question.
No, he didn't lose it. Read the whole thing again. No, incorrect. He's saying this is the reason that read it. He's giving a reason. He's explaining it. You want to put it in a form of a kasha? Put it in a form of kasha. Doesn't bother me. But he's explaining. What's the sibah? The fact is, there are things that resonate. There's a thing called the Nekudas HaSkola. You don't have it quite. You can't really quite explain it or comprehend it, but it resonates. There's a conviction, an intelligent conviction here. We're not talking about an emotional one. We're not talking about intuition. We're not talking faith. We're talking about a cognitive, a cognitive conviction that something is so and so. So he says, and this is the reason that sometimes you'll find that when you innovate a certain idea, even though when he struggles, even though he doesn't understand it, yet something will fall into his mind, something that resonates. And nichalei. And afterwards, when he begins to concentrate and try to explain it, or he goes in Ayin, he looks deeper into it, he still doesn't have, he finds that he doesn't understand it yet. But nevertheless, but it was nichalei, it did resonate. Ayin hu, so here's the explanation, following the hanocha. So the Ayin, the explanation, this is, however, what is the meaning behind it? Because it was. The reason he doesn't understand it, because it's only a hanocha. It's only a resonating conviction. That's the word. That means the resonance is more than the seichel. Like you said in that chapter. Seichel is a very logical, what's the word I want to say? Meticulous, deliberate, logical proof of something. You explain it step by step, undeniable, from a logical point of view. Resonance, what he calls hanocha sichlis, is not seichel, but it's something beyond seichel within seichel. That's really what he's saying here. Because you could have somebody, like I said before, someone can make an excellent case for something, and you say, it doesn't resonate with me. Not necessarily, as I said, because you think it's wrong. I just don't get it yet. I hear the logic, it all adds up on paper, but it doesn't resonate. Something's not clicking. It could be that you haven't yet worked hard enough to internalize it. It doesn't click yet. I mean, I can give you many examples as a writer, I could tell you many times where, especially as a Chazara, when we would hear the Rebbe's words, and initially you think you understood it, then when you start really looking and you realize you don't understand it, and then you look up more the sources, and then with a little time, you always need time. It's always time. It's like the confusion you ever have when you're really researching something. There's always confusion when you have too many details. And then suddenly, if you keep at it, it suddenly emerges. Something emerges and you say, I got it. Now you could have this got it also at the beginning. You could have it, and then when you start really studying it, like you said here, you don't really see you get it. And then with more Haravanya, you come back to that resonance. But the bottom line is resonance and so-called hasoga, comprehension, is not synonymous. They work together. They could work together, but they're not synonymous. That's what he wants to add here. Remember, the whole thing was coming to show us a taste of Hasagas HaMalchus in our times today when we don't really have Hasagas HaMalchus. Now, why is this so important? Because this is the interface. Going back to the interface. If Elokus is so beyond us, and we are limited to just tangible reality, how do we get there? So he's showing how wisdom, even today, not in Mashiach's times, has in it elements that open up just like a peephole into, give us a glimpse into a higher reality. Hanocha resonance is an example in the human life of higher truths, even while we're consumed with our material existence and mitzias. That's what he's coming to do here, which is really the essence of Ayin Beis. This type of. What are you saying here? Yes. I don't know if it's a mashal. Actually, it looks to me more than a mashal. It's actual reality. The fact that we can sense there's something greater than us is not an accident. It's because God planted into our post-symptom structure, with all the concealments, with all our limitations and not understanding all that mahus of elikus and spirituality, resonating truths. It's a tremendous word. It's tremendous.
This resonance is something sichli or beyond sichli?
Both. That's exactly what he's saying. It's not faith, but it's not pure seichel. He's saying it's in seichel, something a little above seichel. He calls it the ayin of elikus in the seichel. It's like within Chochma. Like even the mere fact, he's not saying it here, but sometimes the mere fact the idea comes into your head. You wonder, where did it come from? You say, what was that? Ma. What was that? That itself, that recognition that there's a what, is telling you that there's a mystery. So is the mystery seichel or not seichel? Some people would argue that's part of seichel, the mystery of how an idea comes into your being. So the pure seichel of it is comprehending it. But you can't deny that the moment the flash is also a seicheldika process. What I mean by seichel, it's not faith. It's a process that later will be without that spark, the rest wouldn't develop. So it's where seichel meets beyond seichel, if you want to put it like that. But this is, I would say that the resonance is still closer to seichel than beyond. But it's like he says exactly these words. He says, the resonance is one step more than the seichel. So it's an additional dimension. It's a fascinating. Yeah. Well, if you read all the lines, you'll see. He keeps saying. You say, "Ime yesu sichli, hari primiyusa ikri b'chinas hanoches sichli levad." So even though it's because we're not talking here about some type of matter. Someone says to you that that there was kriyas yamsuf. Kriyas yamsuf is complete faith. You believe the Torah says it. You believe that there were witnesses and that you believe it. It's not some. You don't have a sug in it. You don't even have not mitzvah. It's not mohus. You weren't there. You just believe that it happened. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about some intelligent idea. We say something is greater than us. Everybody here most people would say, yes, I sense that. I know what it is. Some people say, that it's just an illusion. Fine, but there is a sense of more. Or when someone senses awe in a particular situation, you can't deny awe. Go explain. The whole idea of awe is that it's not explainable. I don't know if that's a good example, because awe is already, you can say, is something beyond seichel. But okay. Ubahanochashe b'seichel liyeshe zeh l'mayla har b'masichli, and this resonating the hanocha, the leg, the resonance. That's the leg. So leiktzach. When you feel that type of peace, that your resonance and conviction, those are the best two words I can come up with. It's an intelligent, intellectual conviction. And not to be confused with akshans, with abstinence or stubbornness. It's intellectual conviction. So he says, being that it's far higher than the intelligence itself, there in truth, the inyan resonates. That's what he's saying. So that's what he's saying. That's how he's explaining it. So you put in the phrase of a question. How could I hear you saying that when I look into it, I don't really understand it, and yet I have a sense of truth, a resonance, because the resonance is coming from that which is higher than the seichel itself, even though the seichel is not yet caught up, meaning that you haven't really got it yet. Yeah. Another example, by the way, I just thought of it because this example is very interesting, one that I always use when I explain about Chazara, remembering. You often, well, not often, I'm sure it happens all the time. You ever hear something you really appreciate? You really, at the time, you really felt you got it. Then afterwards you go to somebody and you say, yesterday I heard something unbelievable, or today. They say, okay, tell me. You start opening your mouth and you can't get out two cohesive words. And you just say, it was so clear to me. I can't put it in words, but it was absolutely clear.
It's hogulate.
Yeah. And you're not delusional. It wasn't like you imagined it. You did. It was true. And if you went back to the teacher and you asked him to say it again, what's going on here? I always explain this because I know this is a direct connection to when we used to hear the Rebbe. Because what you hear is your ears are hearing the resonance of the teacher that is so clear to the person, so you think you're there already. Your seichel is not there. You were zeichet to be given like you're ahead of the curve, so to speak. Your ears travel faster than your brain, basically. So you're able to hear a resonating truth that resonated with you too. but it's not yours.
Uh-huh.
That's what the Rebbe said. That's why you have to say some of the name of the person, maybe Geula, because it's not yet yours. You haven't owned it. How do you own it? You sit down and write it down. You review it. There's no tricks. You cannot ride on someone else's resonance.
That's where after Mountain Torah they screwed up because they didn't keep it.
Okay. I never saw Chazal put it quite that way, but it's.
They got the resonance of it, he says.
Yeah. The point I'm trying to say is that it did resonate. You did hear it. It did. You were sure that's the idea is that way, and you'll definitely hear it again. You'll say it's exactly that was correct. That was the explanation, not another explanation. But you can't yet say it in your own seichel because you haven't developed it in your own seichel yet. So in other words, we're given the opportunity to hear something, to sense something even before you really integrate it, basically. So resonance shouldn't be confused with internalization. That's the key. Even on the other hand,
it's not intuition either, right?
Internalization and learning without resonance is equally problematic because there you have the idea, but it doesn't ring true, or it doesn't ring yet. It doesn't. So you really need both. It's a very, very edel, the way he's dissecting it. You see the fact that's why I'm giving this example because you're trying to dissect. Usually they come closer together, but the dissecting of it is tremendous. So it's definitely something beyond. That's for sure. Here's the proof. Things resonate, and you can't explain it to somebody. So what does that mean? It means you haven't yet put it into. It doesn't become seichel for you. Seichel as in hasaga, Binah. It's Chochma. It's the hanocha of Chochma without the Binah. We're not talking about Chochma as the spark of the idea. We're talking about the resonance of Chochma, that element of conviction. Like when you say to keep people honest, you have people like I said before. You could have you can go off in a whole elaborate thing, and someone comes back and say, "Well, you went completely off the reservation. You left the point of departure." You always need to reconnect Binah to Chochma to the point of departure. One of the reasons is resonance. And the truth that of the integrity of the original idea. Okay, so that's what he says. Exactly. There in that world of resonance, there takeb in truth, it resonated. And the seichel, the inyan didn't yet arrive. So like you arrived before your seichel arrived there, basically.
Nevertheless, it's all encapsulated there. In other words, because you brought this.
No, you could stop. You could not harva, and you'll never get it internalized. It'll remain a resonating memory. Yeah, that could happen. That you remember something really special.
Can this come through Shmiya?
What do you mean? I don't know what you mean by Shmiya. You mean hearing a teacher speak?
Yeah.
Which can come? The resonance?
You give an example.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
But not without Harabanya.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
You're talking about the sichli, the second stage.
The sichli has to come with your havara. There's no way it's going to become yours without you doing something about it.
And the same way in this example? The same way in this example, right?
What do you mean?
When it says V'sichel lo ba'ad dayin, that means because there wasn't the work on it yet. Or is it there encapsulated and it's just a matter of flowering on its own?
No, it won't flower on its own. In most cases. I mean, he's not spelling it out, but I would say that it could just remain there. I mean, he's not discussing whether it remains. His goal, of course, is just to point out there's two worlds. But what difference does it make, whether it will flower or won't flower? The bottom line is resonance is not seichel. It's a step before, or a step higher. That's all he wants to. He wants to establish something. This is not a comprehensive discussion on resonance and intelligence. He's coming to explain it clearly. He says clearly before that you have. I mean, yes, you have to work on it. There's no way around that. Yigaita mitzasi.
Well, it's just fascinating thinking how a thought falls into your head. So that thought that falls into your head is a resonance of some sort.
But the thought falls in your head is not always a resonance, by the way. He's not saying that here. He's talking here about the resonance element of Chochma, not the falling into your head part. The falling does not necessarily resonate. You can have many ideas, and how many ideas that fall into our head that don't resonate? We have plenty. Let's say you have a problem, and you're looking for a solution. Every idea that comes to you resonates. 10 things don't resonate, then one does. So Chochma itself is not a resonating reality necessarily. Chochma is just sparks of ideas. He's not really talking about that here. Here he's talking about Chochma as a resonating conviction, intellectual conviction.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm just trying to understand if this process that the Rebbe explained here, it it comes not b'derech shmiya. It comes through something else. I'm wondering if it.
But you see, since it doesn't use the word shmiya, I'm always have a knee-jerk reaction when new words come in because I'm trying to figure what it says here. So if you bring shmiya, I wonder where do you get that word here? He doesn't use it here.
Only from the motion that you brought.
Oh, so you're talking about my example. Okay.
I'm talking about your example and the difference between your example and the way one internalizes a seichel through here. What I'm trying to say.
Well, my example. So let me explain. My example was to explain these two lines. That something nichale, something resonates, but didn't yet come into your seichel. You can't explain it, and it hasn't been internalized intellectually. So there's something of resonance here. The whole point of this section here is to come to explain how there's something in. They're trying to give us a taste of Hasagas HaMalchus, when really all our comprehension today is Hasagas HaMetzias. Let's not leave the point of Chochma here. That's the point here. So to explain that, he's explained that there's a thing called Hanochas Sichlis. It's a point that is Seichel, but it has an element that is beyond pure comprehension. It's called resonance. The example I gave was an example. Something can resonate for you, and you can't explain it yet, because it hasn't come into Seichel yet. Okay? I mean, does it answer your... What?
I'll ask you after.
Since it didn't yet come into Seichel, that's why it also did not come yet into comprehension. So clearly there's a step before that happens. And this is from that chapter as well. The Eitzah, what's the Eitzah? How taka do you bring it into comprehension? The Eitzah, the solution is, or the suggestion is, she kasher atzmei, ezozich tzutrag. You bind yourself, you commit yourself. Sutraga means you commit yourself, you devote yourself. He uses the same expression there in that chapter, right? How was he revisited, so reconnect? How it was by him at the time when it fell into his head, like he said before, neifel. Remember he said that's the sibah that at times a person that when you're struggling with something, even though you don't understand, something will fall into your head as a solution. That's not shmiyah, by the way. That in your own. You're struggling with, let's say, a dilemma, and something you don't understand. But then something will fall into your mind that it's so and so, and you'll recognize some resonating truth. She says, reconnect to that moment, which also applies to my example. Reconnect to the resonating element in it. Beis is galus now. In the beginning of its when it first emerged in the Kudus of Chochma. So, by reconnecting to that moment and recreating it through this, you kasher atzmei, to commit to that. Through that, the idea, which only resonates now, will become seichel gali. Will actually come downward and be integrated. Yeser, seichel gali yeser, meaning more comprehended. And in parentheses, that he should sense the seichel shabazeh more than he senses the resonance. See, before in the parentheses he said, before, what was dominating, that it resonated, that it rang true. And now when you go back and revisit it and connect, you really commit to it, and you connect to it and you work on that, then you come to a point where it actually becomes part of your comprehension. No, that's Binah. I mean, it doesn't say here, but I would say it's Binah here. It doesn't say it, so I don't know why. I don't like to add words that unless. Does that help when you know it's das? Why? Because then it fits into everything you understood till now. So well. Okay.
It looks like it's still Binah. We're talking about Hasaga. We're talking about.
It could say both. I mean, I don't like to confuse matters because then you start getting into Binah and Das. And what's the difference?
So that's not a level of Binah. That's the way it fell into your head. That Why is it Binah?
Because of the context of everything you're learning here is Binah. You'll soon see it's Chochma and Binah. But he didn't say it yet, so we don't have to say Binah yet either. I'm fine with sticking with what. That in other words, it means there should be the hargoshas hasichli. You should sense the intelligence of it and the logic of it more than you're sensing the resonance of it. That's step 2, basically.
And just by revisiting, there's not another process.
Well, he wants to bring it into seichel. He doesn't want to just go back to the resonating element. Listen, something can resonate. You can just bask in the resonance. That's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about working into comprehension. That you should really. He's giving you an eitzah how a person who has something had a resonating element needs to now develop it. So the way is to go back there. And then the inyan will also come into a comprehension.
He lost his residence. He lost that quality of residence.
Lost? I wouldn't say the word lost. I don't see any word lost here ever. There's no lost here. On the contrary, I think the residence is there, or else he wouldn't be able to revisit it. Except he can't explain it. There's no comprehension in it.
But he just revisits the idea. He
says he revisits the moment when it first emerged in his mind and when it was resonating.
And still, the residence is still there.
Why not?
I don't know. Just wonder, because now he has more gushes to
It's not
say.
there.
Are you imagining yourself doing it, or are you talking here mathematical?
I myself doing it.
So think about it. I gave an example. You heard an idea, right? Or you came up with or something. I'm using the heard idea because it's more common than the other one. The other one is more you're struggling with an issue that you don't really have an answer to. Like you said, ain't a moving lay. Something in your ain't a moving lay. You're struggling, whatever issue it is, back and forth. Should I do this? Should the answer be that? Not say action related. It could be action related. It could be anything. You come up with this solution. Maybe this is the pshat. Maybe that's the pshat. Back and forth. It all doesn't. It's not it. Then 1 second, middle of nowhere, something clicks. Maybe that. So it's a resonating moment. You don't yet have. When you sit down and start saying what clicked, you start saying, realize you don't really have words. I don't know. I'm not sure what clicked. Something clicked. Question is, how do you take that click and turn it into something you can explain and turn it into a real solution? Like a lot of times in engineering or in science, there are people and they come with someone says, I think I have an idea. But then he has to go work on it to make it work. The idea was just a sense of like almost an intuition. Here we're talking a conviction, a resonance that gave you that you're on the right track. But it doesn't mean you've developed it yet. Then comes development. So one of the ways is to go back to the moment that you had that resonance and retrace your steps and now try to develop it. And with work, he says this will ultimately come to hasaga. But it's for sure going to come with work. And you'll have both. The resonance is just an element of this. I mean, I don't know how much of, whether it's 1 or 2 or 25 or 100% of the resonance is shining in you. I mean, there's no rule to this. It's in each person in their own way. The example I gave, which is not the example that he's giving, what I just said here is what he's saying here. I gave another example just to help make it a little more palatable. You hear someone else say something, an idea, it resonates to you, then you go back and you can't really explain it. But you go back to the resonating and say, what resonated? You go back to the point. Let's say you even wrote it down. Many times you write down things and then you later try to understand you go back to your notes and you're lost.
We do that all the time.
Right? You're lost. But then if you work a little, you start reading your notes and then say, now this. And starts emerging. Sometimes you need to do this 25 times. Sometimes you need a lot of time for it. It's not things that are complicated. What we're discussing right now, guarantee that maybe there are resonating things happening right now. I'm guarantee that you won't be able to explain it necessarily yet. That's how it is. It's the nature of the thing. But that doesn't mean you can't. It means it's going to take work. But a key thing to do is that you do have a coordinate to work with, the resonance. If you didn't have the resonance, you couldn't go back there, then you have nothing to talk about. You don't even remember. So obviously, the hanocha is the nekudas sichlis is a critical element here, because it gives you something to work with. I've had this many times. I thought a great idea. We started developing it. No one wrote down the idea. I thought I'd never forget it, because when you're in the moment you think, you're overconfident that you is, and then a few days go by and I say, 1 second, what we're writing here doesn't sound what, And someone said, "Do you remember what did I originally say?" I sometimes call someone. I say, "What did I say when we spoke 3 days ago?" My work or something. I say, I don't remember exactly. Then I try to find it. I find it doesn't matter. I don't even need someone who understood what I said. I just need to what exact words did I use. And then when you say it, I say, that's what I meant. And then you get back on track. And sometimes it's very frustrating because you can't find what you really said, or what was the original spark. But the original sparks are critical. Today, I don't make. Anytime I'm dealing with something, I immediately write down. It's not so much the memory to remember, is because those words carry the spirit of that original moment. It's not so much the words themselves. It's like how you expressed it at that first time reminds you. Say, okay, that's how it was. Like I remember the first time I came to understand Tiferes. So I came and I kept struggling Tiferes, how Tiferes, what Tiferes does to Chesed. And it came up. I don't know if I saw it or if I read it or I made it up myself. I don't remember. I used the words harmony within diversity. And I've used this hundreds of times. And people who hear it, they say, harmony within diversity, that I understand. Because the words have something about them that resonate. You understand there's diversity, you understand there's harmony. And we all understand harmony within diversity. And it's an excellent expression to capture something very resonating. It doesn't mean you can now sit down and explain it all, but you have something to work with. You have a key line. We would look for, when the Rebbe would speak, we would look for the punchlines. Those one line where the Rebbe would give you the soul of the idea in expression. Like even here, there's expression. Sometimes you see, I'll stop and I'll say, you got to remember that line. It's a critical line because it's like sums up the idea in a way that resonates. Then you go back and have to develop it and flesh it out. I know this all resonates to me. What can I say to you? How about you? No, look. It needs to be dissected in a detail, but the concept that resonance and comprehension is very clear. 2 different steps. There's no question about it. I've heard many times someone make a presentation and it doesn't ring true. Not that, it's not because I disagree or it's false. It's just I don't get it. And sometimes you get it immediately. People who are really clear in their own minds are very good, and they communicate. You can say this person gets it because you get it. Then, if they don't get it, you're definitely not getting it. Even though there's a few rare people who know, like Rabbi would tell us, they know how to explain something to others that they themselves don't understand. That's another parsha. There are such people. Like a mashpech. A mashpech, like a funnel. It funnels to others that it itself. The funnel doesn't get smarter. It just knows how to funnel. Now there are people who have a chush. They have the dramatic words, the words and words, and they speak it in such a way. Wow, that's so clear. And then you talk to them, you see they don't begin to get what they just said.
They still could be effective then? Are they like teachers or what?
You never went to Holy Torah, so how do you?
I heard enough from you.
Okay. Holy Torah teachers are not even that level. That's the problem. That's already, they don't get it, but someone gets it. There are people who say, there's lower levels. Don't push it. There are people who, what they say, they don't get, no one else gets, and the whole thing is a waste of time. This at least is somebody getting it. They're not getting it, but you're getting it. Look, there's a question about Moshe Rabbeinu, by the way, as a Navi, when he spoke not as a Chochma, as a Navi. Does a Navi get what he's saying? Or is he himself also as a Chocham, he's also a recipient of his own Nevuah? Because a Nevuah is okay, so there's a big question, and Chochma and others, and they ultimately you want to have obviously both together. Because you say Chocham Adif Menavi. So for example, or even Moshe, when he paskened as a Psak, is it the same when he's being mefalpel in the theories? No. Tzemach Tzedek and Rab Hillel, you know the story, right? Tzemach Tzedek said a Maimer, and then by the table they were arguing Pshat, and the Rab Hillel said one Pshat, Tzemach Tzedek said another, and he argued with the Rebbe. They said, how could you argue? The Rebbe said the Maimer himself. He said, when he says the Maimer, it can Sinasim Sinai. Now we're talking Seichel. And Seichel is another world. A similar story with Chaim Ber. Zelensky. He was one of big Moscow from Kremenchuk. The Rebbe Rashab sent a message to him to go ask him Pshat in Imre Binah, a certain section Imre Binah. Imre Binah is one of those very deep stuff that Al Rebbe Rashab himself said that my hair fell out of my head learning Imre Binah. Yeah, that's what he said. The Horge Krochen. So he sent a message to ask him how he learns a certain chapter. No response. So Rebbe Rashab later met one of the Chassidim. He said, tell him that I'm not waiting for an answer. So he went to him. He says, the Rebbe was waiting for your answer. So he says, Et eis kommen an mir. He'll resolve it without me. He doesn't, And the guy told that to Rebbe Rashab. Rebbe Rashab said, I don't need him to understand Pshat. I just want to know how Seichel Anushi is getting through this piece. Understand? Yeah, understands. So he thought that that he's smart. That Rebbe Rashab is smart. He doesn't need him. The truth is, the Rebbe Rashab didn't talk about Elakus. He doesn't need him. He's talking about how does Seichel Anushi.
Could you connect it here and you'll say that Rabbi Rashab had more resonation than he had resonance.
Resonance. Can you say the Rebbe Rashab more
in this Imre Binah or whatever? Like he knew what it was. He understood it. He even.
How would you explain Seichel Anushi, Seichel Eliki? Listen, Chassidus wants us to understand Elikus with Seichel Anushi, not just with Seichel Eliki. You see the Rebbe Rashab himself is giving examples from the world. Why does he need examples like that? It's not just for us, it's also for him, because there's something, for us, the worldly examples, so to speak, world examples that are tangible, because we go from the bottom up, so we need something to hold on to be able to appreciate. For a Rebbe, I would say it's the opposite. For him, there's a resonance when if he's able to bring an abstract idea that for him is completely resonating into Elam Hazeh, that's a chiddush that adds to his seichel as well. I have to say that for sure. It goes both ways because it's like a teacher who can explain it to lower level students with good examples. The teacher himself will be enriched by that. That's without. Okay, so we have here okay, fine. So then it comes into seichel. So where are we here? This also will explain. This is also we find certain different things, various things that are higher than comprehended seichel. And for great scholars, great wise people, there's room in their seichel for these subjects as well. Not just through faith. But
for resonance.
He didn't finish yet. He's just explaining another phenomenon now. Based on this discussion that there's a resonance, a conviction in Chochma, which is explaining what Muhus means, even though it's Seichel, the first thing he explained, the reason that therefore that things resonate, even though we don't understand them completely, and then when you want to understand them, you need to revisit. He's explaining now another phenomenon. That there are things that are L'mayla M'Seichel HaMusik. They're higher than comprehensible logic. But yet there are wise people who get something in Seichel. They get it. Not through faith, but they have some Mokim Zem. Seichel. How do you explain Hota Ortin Seichel? It's not faith, but there's some intellectual sense of it in their mind because they're very smart people. This too, this is the level of Hanachas Sichlis, a resonance. In other words, there are things that for the average person will appear not logical or not make sense, but for a far wiser person, there's a resonating truth there. It's also Mokim B'Seichel. He's not saying it's Seichel. It means that their Seichel leaves room for it. So there are examples for this. For example, I'll just give you an example completely off the wall. In healing, especially psychological stuff. Sometimes a person who suffered in a certain way, so if anyone with regular logic is going to suggest certain things, but they'll never suggest something which they can't relate to because it seems counterintuitive. Counterintuitive, but a smarter person with more experience will suggest something counterintuitive that no one would have imagined. And actually when you hear about it, you think it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. But it works. Because Seichel, there's something in Seichel that makes sense, and then there's a smarter person can see in a situation something and they'll understand something that another person will not see as making sense. I can give you examples if you want. But it's a certain counterintuitive element for a regular person, but for someone who's smarter, they know how to find it. I'm not saying that it's always that way. Not everything counterintuitive is right. Like they say, paranoia, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean no one wants to get me. Just because it's counterintuitive doesn't mean that it's wise. But there are things that can be counter logical, but someone wiser will think that they will see the wisdom in that. We had an example for this. If you remember Chochma Meva Medaite by Meiser Merkava, he spoke like this. I'll tell you where it is. It's in So he said there on the right side of the page. I remember. Yeah. So he said like this. He says, like even though apparently it seems like other things, a different way, this Chacham Mev Medaita will get it. That it really means something else. Because that's similar, that's what you're right? No, but read the next page. Read the next page.
Is part of it,
But the next page says the exact opposite, that even if everybody else seems one way, he'll get it a different way. Okay, is that related to this? There he's talking about Chochma Machshavas Nalamis of Sipur. That Sipur reveals even a deeper truth, that Srid has reached a Bli Gvul. How does that fit here? Yeah, it does fit here. So Chochma, Sagas HaMahus, is the Bli Gvul.
The Malach is a Keli.
Okay, very good. Okay. That's not what I was reading. I told you where I read.
I know, but I'm saying, what about this line? That's
not what I was talking about. No, look at the next page, at the top of the next page. Anyway, so that's why even they cannot really explain it. They can't explain it because it's not mamash seichel. That's it. Tzadik Zayin said, chapter Tzadik Zayin?
Yeah.
Why don't you read what I told you and it's mamash word for word? You keep.
I see what you're saying.
He says exactly what he says here, that other people won't get it and he does get it.
Yeah.
That's
the idea of Shasik Rav?
He said it before Shasik Rav, but on a lower level. Shasik Rav was more Yisrael Sab and Tfuna, the midas of Chochma, of Abba V'Yimei. Shasik Rav, he used before on a lower level. Shasik Rav was more the Nihi of Chochma, where a person is coming to a conclusion. There's different, because there he's coming to a conclusion and he's convinced this is the conclusion even though he can't fully explain it. There's a similarity to this, but he used it on a lower level. Here he's talking how it's on a higher intellectual process, a conviction or a resonance, not so much a conclusion. But there is definitely a similarity, the idea that you can't fully explain it. So he says, well, that's exactly
right, yeah.
So in Seichel itself, it's not yet manifest. But in Hanocha Sichlis, in the resonance of intelligence, the conviction, there's room for it. There's place for it. And it's not a munah. Now he goes back, all this is coming to explain. From all this we understand that in the Nekudas HaSkola, in this point, in this concentrated point of intelligence, the primary thing is resonance. That's a Chochma. And now, when this comes into comprehension, we talk step 2. Now that it's expanding, with expansion of the comprehension, in a multitude of details, and abundant explanation, now it doesn't radiate in this comprehension the resonating element that was in the Nakuda. Because now it's expanded outward. Now the focus is on the Seichel, as he said. So here the resonating element is somewhat lost. No, if the word lost is not the right word, not meir. It's not meir. Sharigam daku se'er, because also that daku se'er, that subtle energy, she'nirgish by Nakuda. It's interesting. This is a very interesting expression. Daku se'er. It's like in the spark, in the seed, in the germ. The germ. Nakuda is a good word. Germ of the idea. That the subtle energy that was sensed in the germ, misalam ba'sagas hapratim, is concealed in the comprehension of the details, the Binah, Kaneda. In the details of Binah. Here it says clearly Binah, as it's known. She's saying a different level. Okay, fine. So now he's saying it. There he didn't say it yet. That's why I didn't. Sharigam daku se'er. So he says two things here: daku se'er and hanocha sichlis. Daku se'er means the subtle energy that's there, that is concealed, and for sure the resonance. So he added a new level now: resonance and subtle energy. That definitely the resonance misalemes lagamri is completely concealed. So two things so-called gets concealed. One completely concealed, and one is somewhat concealed. There he only says misalam. Here he says misalem es legamri. Now, what means concealed? It doesn't mean you can't revisit it. It means now you're focused on the details. It's obvious. You're now fleshing it out. So you're not focusing on the intensity of that type of so-called pleasure or the clarity that you had at the moment. Now you're talking about how do you do something with it. So you have to break it into details. However, now comes step 3. After all this fleshing out and the comprehension, when he comes to Nekudas HaTamtzis, not Nekudas HaSechel. Nekudas HaTamtzis means the summary at the end. You sum it up. So, Shal Kol HaSaga Ve'emek HaMusig Shala, Ech Shemusig gets meaning Kol HaSaga's Pratis. When you come now to the conclusion, Tamtzis is a summary of the entire comprehension, Ve'emek HaMusig Shala, and the depth of the ideas. Ech Shemusig gets meaning how the core idea was comprehended b'chol hasagas pratis, from all the detailed elements of this comprehension. Then meir bezeh, and that radiates etzem nekudas haskola. That original nekuda that began the process, that was resonating, and its subtle energy went into Binah. In other words, it spread out into all the details. And then when you come to the end, that last nekuda connects to the first nekuda. So the summary, he said this earlier, we learned this at length earlier also, with the Nekuda of Chochma, I think also around chapter Mem Beis, Mem Gimel, those areas. Mem Aleph? Mem Aleph at the end, okay. Like it says elsewhere. Why doesn't he zeichen it? It's interesting. He zeichen Mem Beis. Mem Aleph, you say? Can I look at it a second? Let me see. Mem Aleph? He talks about a Kud Tamsis there?
No, not the Tamsis part. But
no, there's another Tam, but there's a chapter where it talks Tamsis. It's on the left side, that I know. Okay, we'll find it later. Fine. Maybe earlier. But bottom line is okay. So the Tamsis reconnects to that. Yeah, that's the way it should be.
Like a research paper.
Like an executive summary should have the essence of it. Then you flesh the whole thing out, and at the end, well, executive summary is usually written at the end, but you start with a.
Sometimes you present it with an abstract, and then you go into the whole thing,
and then you sum it up. Yeah.
So it's like the kids said, there's the Kudus skull, it's like the kids said.
At the end, the kids are at the end. Yeah, very good.
Wow.
Hold on a second. Yeah, because he said in the last chapter that Pnimius Hakav is the Kitzur, teaching your student in a concentrated, summarized way. But that's not the resonance. That's a summary. Okay, fine. Let's continue here. Hinegam Meir Bezet. So he said, so now also this resonating element is sensed in this nekuda. The nekuda meaning the tamtzis. But now it's in a state of comprehension.
Now you can explain it to somebody.
Because you've fleshed it out. But not mamish hasaga, not kamish. Shahari klolos nekudas hatamtzis eine basaga gemura. Because also, even the general summary is not total comprehension. Belavushe hasaga, in the garments of comprehension. Shahari hizeo b'chinas ha'ayin de Binah.
That was the cap?
Not necessarily. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't want to go there. I just thought of it. I'm not sure. The kav is definitely etzema kav is made in etzema chochma. But I don't want. Let's finish with this, and then we'll see if that fits.
What is this?
The kav is the summary of everything before. The kav comes from there. I don't know, it's not clear. But here, bottom line is, so this is the Ayin of Binah. So we have the Ayin of Chochma is the resonance. Binah is the development of it in real Hasaga. That's real comprehension. Then comes the Tamtzis, the summary, he says, is more Seichel now, because it's gone through the Seichel process. It's not like the resonance that's beyond, but it's also not pure Seichel, because it's a sense of the Ayin and Binah. The Ayin of Chochma like an Ayin and Binah. That's what he says. It's still an Ayin and Binah. Okay, it's clear. Like if someone just reads the summary and doesn't read the whole process, they're not going to get it like someone who wrote the whole thing.
Normally when
And the summary has an element of it that's very similar to the resonating point, but it's after the fact. So it has a similarity. So it's, in other words, let's put it this way: there's levels here. There's the resonance, there's Binah, and there's another level which is summary. I can explain this distinction. It's not that.
Normally, ayin is something.
Ayin means is less of an ayin is a sense of something a little beyond the conscious experience. That's what ayin means here.
It evolved after Hasagas Hakrotim. That's interesting.
I don't know if it evolved. It emerged. It emerged through because look, within the throes of Binah itself, you can become Big Yesh. When you come to the summary, you're so-called reconnecting it to the original point of departure. So it brings more bittul into the picture. Rather than me understanding, because it's going back to it's like the Nekudas HaChochma, meaning the resonating element is now being expressed after the Seichel.
But the Rabbi expresses it's something that you come through.
55, what chapter is that?
Gimel 33.
Okay, good.
The Rabbi expresses that it's something that you come through after the pratim.
Yeah.
You have to go through it before the pratim.
How could you make a summary before the pratim?
The same way you can have the Nachas HaSeichel that brings you to something else.
What do you need? But you don't have any. You have the resonance. Now you need to start understanding it. You need to start fleshing it out. There's no room for another step. Where's there a step here? You have a Chochma. Now you start developing it, and then you come to a conclusion. I mean, in the middle of Binah, can you reconnect? Of course you can reconnect. But it usually works, it looks like that.
I just would have thought that from the Ayin Binah you'd get the Binah and all its properly.
Just think of it practically as our human process. Person has an idea, they write it down, they share it with others, they start developing it. Now starts the expansion of Binah. When he comes to the conclusion, there's an element of it that he says is not like he says here, not a soga mamish. Now he says, now the resonance also is sensed in the summary, in this tamtzis. But now it's in a form of comprehension. But loy hasoga mamish, shari closed because of the tamtzis. Ene ba hasoga, mura b'levush hasoga, shari zabchinas ayin debina. For who kamay nekuda da'ed b'li levush. It's like the point, the germ of the energy without a garment. That's what the summary is like. It's an interesting expression as well. Nekuda se'er b'li levush. Right. Why? Because the summary doesn't have all the details in it. So the summary has something that the resonance doesn't have. It has it follows the process. In other words, when you heard something that resonated, or something came to you resonated, and you didn't have any comprehension, so we said before, that's like, you have the resonance, you don't have Binah, you don't have comprehension. Now comes the state of comprehension. You have comprehension, and then you come to a summary. You're able to summarize the whole idea. Your summary of the entire idea has in it comprehension plus the resonance. So that's what the Tamsis has. Now you could have only Binah without a summary and without the resonance either. The full picture is when you're able to summarize your idea, the idea, in a few words after you've processed it all. That's the best sign. In other words, let's say you heard something resonating from a teacher, and then you can't really explain it. Fine. Let's say you could even memorize what he said, the teacher, but he repeating what resonated by him, not what resonated by you. You go now through the whole process of Binah and you make it yours. Then you summarize it. Then you're talking about the resonance is coming through your words and through your comprehension. So that's what he says. It's a nekuda without the levush. Nekuda se'er b'li levush. Interesting. But nevertheless, now we're already state of comprehension. Because also the way, the method of comprehending of the summary, also the resonance is now in a comprehension in a way that is in other words, the fact that the summary follows the comprehension, so then also the resonance is now traveling through and settling through the comprehension, and it's a form of hisyashvus b'meche. So now you have the resonance plus the internalization. That's the key here. Resonance plus internalization. Because in the initial point, in the resonance before the comprehension, that resonance is not internalized. As I said, you can't explain it. What? One second. Oh. No.
It's lower than resonating. One line later.
Hold on a second. 1 second. I gotta understand this one. I don't understand this. Hisamtus is lower than Hanocha?
Yeah.
Where'd you get that from? Because he says this. The circular logic, because he says that's why it's lower. That's nice, but Hisamtus means exactly like what resonance means. The emes. Why are you saying it different? Because you know it's different, because he says it that way.
We spoke about it before.
Who's we?
Here in the shir.
I don't remember. Hisamtus is lower than Hanocha Sichlis. If anything, Hisamtus is higher. Riyah. The Riyah of Chochma is higher than resonance. Okay. He does say it. Lula de Mastapina, I have to read this again. Ki Hisamtus de Chochma hi bis Yashvus. Aval Hanocha nal hare ein ze in Hisamtus, kim Hanocha shebesichli ein ze bis Yashvus. Okay. He says the Hanocha is not Hisamtus. It's only Hanocha shebesichli. And that's not Beis Yashvus.
But we're still saying that the Hisamtus is higher. We haven't changed that, have we?
If it's higher, something higher is Beis Yashvus and something lower is not.
Can't be higher.
Why not?
Anyway, let's read it, and we'll understand it later. Fine, I don't understand it yet. It doesn't resonate yet. So be it. It's fine.
As Chochma comes down from the highest level,
we have to be humbled.
is it diluted?
Don't think you get it all. Huh?
As Chochma comes
Well, so let me just read it again.
levels, is it diluted as it comes over?
I don't know. I don't know. It's not what he's discussing here now.
You're going from Chochma.
Okay, let's go on here again. Let me go back here. She says, let me just go back to the context. Maybe we'll understand from that. So the Tamtz is the summary now is already internalized, and that's more, and it's already now the resonance is now through the filter of the summary, and therefore it's internalized. Good. The benekudas haskola, kaidem hasaga, because the point of haskola, meaning before comprehension, that's clear. He said that earlier too. It's not hishashvus, it's not settled, it's not internalized. As a matter of fact, when he thinks about it, he realizes he doesn't really get it. He just senses the truth of it. It's a resonance, conviction. The samtus, the truth, I would say samtus is resonance, but I can't use that here. So the emes of Chochma, that's Beis Yashvus. But the resonating point, it's not in of hisamtus. It's only the resonance or the resonance in the seichel, and that's not Beis Yashvus.
Not Beis Yashvus, the Revolution Seichel.
Right, exactly. In other words, the Hisamtus, that's the whole level of Chochma is Beis Yashvus.
Ultimately, you can't
That part
multitask.
is
Well, okay. The reason I don't understand is because I don't see where Hisamtus Aseh Chochma came into here. He hasn't made any mention of it till
The
now.
word Hisamtus before
No.
this page?
No. That's why I'm surprised that it's coming in here, because it doesn't say it anywhere.
Yes, as
Would be the assumptions
Chochma because midas sheba Chochma, or actually beside this amsus hasechel ba middle chesed.
What does that have to do with this?
You asked me where you said the word is amsus.
You mean the whole Chassidus? I'm sure this says it.
Lower than hanacha.
It's just you found me somewhere that it says it. It's not context. It's not there.
Definitely,
Okay.
Samtus is lower than Anoch.
Well, that's what he's saying here.
That's definite, and that's somehow how it doesn't.
Okay, one second. But one thing he's saying is Hanocha is not Ari Ein Ze In Samtus Kim Hanocha Shebesichli. Yeah, and the Ein Ze Beis Yashvus. I mean, I could explain it. I'm just, by me, I have no problem explaining it. The problem is, it suddenly doesn't. It comes in without any reference to it till now. Till now, everything was very clear. Resonance, Shashvus, Seichel, Tamsis. The Samtus comes from seemingly nowhere. And I'm sure there's a depth there. I just don't get it. That's all I'm saying. And it's also not, I am very focused on the flow. Line by line. I don't see anywhere where he alluded to it even.
But isn't there a concept of Isamtus on different levels?
Of course there is, but I'm saying in this chapter there was no discussion of this level. Fine, it's fine. Let's just go on here because he's coming to a point. But after the comprehension, you come now to the point, the summary. How do you begin this shashvus? Now it's internalized.
That's in Binah.
That's in Binah, yeah. That's ready because now it's come after the hasaga, after the comprehension. V'zeu hanakuda primis the Binah, and this is the nakuda primis. This is the internal nakuda, the point of Binah, the summary after the comprehension. Shikeli leprimis the nakudas chochma, and that's a container for the inner dimension of the Nakuda of Chochma. So Chochma, Nakuda was a resonating point that was not internal. In Binah, Binah is Chochma plus Binah. See, the Nakuda of Binah has both benefits. The resonance plus the internalization. Very clear.
But it's a lower level of.
But Samtus of Chochma, I still don't know how that fits in here. But so be it. He added a line, like I look at it like a parenthesis. I'm going to have to think it through. It's fine. It doesn't disturb the havana of the understanding of the chapter. It's just interesting.
So what does it mean? It's a klila plimius nakudas hachma. It seems to be saying that after the avodah of Binah bepratim, and you come to the concept, then after that, okay, now I'm a keli. Don't you need chachma to go through all this process before?
So that's exactly what he said. He said that the Nakudas HaTamtzis, the summary, contains within it the resonating element of the Nakuda of Chochma, but it's now in a form of comprehension. Not total comprehension, but now with a lot more comprehension because it's followed Binah. What's the problem? I mean, don't think mathematically, think practically.
I can't help but they're sitting next to me.
You start with a point, you heard a resonating thought. You can't explain it yet. Then you go ahead and explain it. The only way this will be understood is if you personalize it. You have to find an example in your life. If you're trying to fit yourself to figure out the Rebbe Rashab the way he understood it, you're not going to get it. You need to find how it plays itself out in your life and me in my life. You must find that, or else this becomes memorized formulas. It's not memorized formulas. There's a logic here. The logic is that you begin, you hear something. Wow, that sounded great. You realize I can't really explain it. You realize I don't really fully understand it. Then you study it, and study and study and study. You internalize it. Then you finish the internalization and you write a summary. Or in your own mind, now you have a summary of it. That summary is a keli for the initial resonance at the beginning of the process. Plus, now you went through the journey. You've internalized it. As students, as kids, we heard things that years later you realize, that's the line that I was told, now I understand it. And it's a whole different experience. That's what it means here. Yeah. Look, when the Rebbe Rashab concludes here, Primis Binah Chochma, because he's trying to ground it in the levels that he's discussing here. So this is like so-called identifying, what is the code word? Primis Binah, the Primis Binah, that's Tamtzis plus comprehension. He's just now giving us the coordinates of a whole concept that he just explained. So these are just now the names, the code words, if you wish.
Okay.
Summary.
Plus comprehension.
Yeah. Summary. Yeah. Excellent. Good. that Chochma of Binah, meaning Chochma within Binah, that is like, in other words, the resonance within the summary. The Chochma, the Binah, Nikra Nekuda Behechala, is considered to be a point within a corridor, the Hechel. Because Nekuda is Chochma, Hechel is Binah. It's similar to when you say, for example, you plant a seed in the ground, or the fertilization of an egg. The seed enters into the egg which is in the womb. So it's a Hechel. That's the example. Hine nekuda haprimis anal hi hechale umekeme de nekuda sachochma. Nekuda haprimis is talking now of Binah. That is the hechel, the so-called resting place, or the place of residence. Hechel here meaning, literally a hechel means a hall, a chamber, right? Umekeme de nekuda sachochma. The place where the nekuda sachochma shenistera sham dafke. That's where it will be concealed. That's where it will be embedded, would be the better word. Shenistera sham, dafka there. Hainu shesham ba b'chinas hasaga, because there it comes into a form of comprehension. When a male fertilizes a female egg, that's exactly what's happening. You have nekudas hachochma entering into a place where it can reside, and if it's fertilized, niklat, as we learned before, haklot, that it's retained and contained, it begins to start to develop. That's when that's how Abba and Ima unite. He's talking here about Yichud Abba v'Ima Eloyin. Remember, that's what he's leading to. So the Yichud of Abba and Ima Eloyin is essentially the Nekuda of Chochma, which he spoke here. Nekuda in general is the spark, or the resonance. Then came comprehension, the wide, expansive comprehension. It came to a summary. In that summary, you have the Nekuda Behechel. So the Nekuda is a place where it's now embedded and resides in a concealed form. We call it Nesteris. He's explaining the words when we say that Chochma comes into Binah, what happens. So it's a Nekuda Behechel. You have both elements going on, working together. Take away one, you only have you don't have the complete picture. And it's called Nekuda Behechala. In other words, it's like it's miyuchad, that it's unique to it, it's tailored to it, it is exclusive. Exclusive is the word. Like we say a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll in its chamber, in its behechel, in the ark. Actually, Sefer Torah behechel is talking about the Sefer Torah in the Beis Hamikdash. In the Kodesh Kodashim, they put the Sefer Torah. Shein lamed beis nesivas chochma. There's an expression. Beichale kule emer kovid. We say such an expression somewhere.
Yeah. We said it Friday night.
What the context? Beichale kule emer kovid. Beichale kule, and the entire heichel they said kovid. What's kovid? Shein lamed beis nesivas chochma. Is the gematria.
Kovid is lamed beis. Kovid is 32.
Yeah, kovid is 32. So in the Heichel, Kule of Binah, you say Kovid, which is... Oh, you mean to say, not you say, Heichel Kule is described as Kovid?
It resonates Kovid.
Heichel Kule, Emer Kovid, okay. Shein Lamed Beis Nesivas Chochma. Kovid is 2032, yeah. This is the inner dimension of Binah. Remember, we're talking Abba v'Imi Eloyin, which is the Heichel HaMiyuchad, the exclusive chamber and place for the spark, for the point of Chochma to reside. Who in Meitzer Yam or Meitzer Mi? We say Mitzrayim is both the letters Meitzer Yam and Meitzer Mi. Meitzer Yam means the narrowness of the boundaries of the boundaries of the sea. Or Meitzer Mi, the Yam ubchinas Yam HaChochma, or Mi ubchinas Binah. So Yam is the sea of wisdom. Or Mi is the level of Binah. It doesn't explain why Kaned as it's known. Or Meitzer
Mi is because it's Mantashar Binah, and then the Nun. It's Mi, Mem and Yud is Nun.
Okay, maybe. Yeah. Or Meitzer Yam ubchinas primis hanekudas Chochma. Hamislabeshes benekudas primis the Binah Meitzer Mi. So the boundaries, or the Meitzer of the sea, is the inner point of Chochma that manifests in the inner point of Binah. Boy. Okay. The thing is, he didn't explain yet how all this is giving us a taste of Asagas HaMahus. which is the real intriguing element here. Okay, so I guess you didn't get there yet. That's going to be another 2 chapters for that. But we're rolling along, right? Okay, so what do we have here? That's what the Kitzur. The Kitzur, I guess. So the Kitzur is the Yuvenze. To understand this, which is what? Now he's moving to the 4th level of intelligence, of intellect. Abba ve'imei loyin, which is going to be the Yuchot Chodesh of Matan Torah. Shisrael Sabba v'tfuna, he discussed his Hamayich, and how intellect informs the application. The Midas, right, the application. What he called inclinations of Chesed and Gvura. Then he moved on to Abba ve'imei loyin, which is the Etzem HaKav, the Primis HaKav, where you get, which is connects all the way to the Etzem of Ein Sof. So to explain Hasogas HaMuchus of that level, he went into a whole discussion to give us a taste of it. He said, let's discuss the resonating point of Chochma. The resonating point then follows into the Binah, the comprehension, and concludes in a Tamsis, and then is the Yichud of Chochma Binah, where Binah is a Keli, a Kahechel for Chochma. And you have both elements, everything working together.
From the resonating point goes to the assumption.
So now the resonance has now permeated the comprehension, which is was distant initially, and you come to a summary that where you bring them both together, a real yichud of Chochma and Binah. Kud behechel. The Yuven zed dehini benekudas haskola ha'ikru ha'nochas sichlis. In the Nekudah of Skola, which is Chochma, the point, the primary thing there is what? Is the resonating element, the Hanochas Sichlis, the Leitzach. Or B'Binah hi Hasichli v'Hasaga. And in Binah, the primary thing is the intelligence and the comprehension. Or B'Nekudah Satamtzis, in the conclusion, the summary of Bechinas Ayin, the Binah, which is the Ayin of Binah, Shemer Sham Nekudah Skola, Nirgesham Gam HaNochas Sichlis, where radiates the initial resonating point of the Askola. There it senses and feels also the resonance of Seichel. But now it's in a form of comprehension, like comprehension of the summary, and it's internalized. It doesn't mention Isamtus. Okay. And that's that the inner spark or inner point or inner germ of Chochma is now in the Heichel Pnimi, in the inner chamber of Binah. V'za'in Meitzer Yam and Meitzer Mi. That's Meitzer Yam, Chochma, Yam, and Mi, Binah.
Explain that a little to understand that.
Which part?
The Meitzer Yam, Meitzer Mi.
He just says it's a level. He doesn't say much about it. Basically, Meitzer Yam, it looks like Mitzrayim is based on those words. It's Meitzer Yam. The Yam could be written Yud Mem, it could be Mem Yud. Yam is Chochma, Mi is Binah, that's all he's saying. He's not really explaining it. I think he's just grounding it in the level. Other places discuss it, but not here. Nothing really to add. The explanation is what he said. That the resonance of Chochma enters into the summary of Binah, and now you have Meitzer Yam and Meitzer Mi. Okay. I think the next chapter he speaks about Meitzer Yam, Meitzer Mi. Look at the next chapter. Okay, so we did chapter 138, page 267 and 268.